we here in front of this camera.
For a long time, I just said, you know what? I'm just going away from necks and going right to saddles, so that way I can get them about the length, or not the length, but the
Okay.
size.
If I wanted to show this book, I should show it to that camera. Okay.
Anything bigger than the Vise show.
I remember was the next
Okay.
Technical difficulties.
the saddle was soft.
You won't be able to see it up there.
Oh,
but
okay.
you can
It's
see
like
it.
Okay.
that softness.
And it sounds like
But
the
the
other
no,
has
they're
changed.
so much different.
It's like Michael Grillo puts his, he's got a little quiz.
All right.
We're just having a conversation.
Hey friends, glad you guys could join us for our third annual On The Vise 2022. Pretty incredible that this is our third year. What do they say? When time flies, when you're having fun. So, hey, without you guys' continued support, we would not be able to bring this kind of these kinds of shows to you, and these resources, these educational resources. That's what I was trying to say to you guys. We just want to give a special thank you and just appreciation to you guys for whether it was a guide trip, whether it was a rod or reel, you know, you guys' support through purchases allow us to be able to bring you this kind of educational resources, and it's something we're really committed to doing, and really is at a core of Montrose Anglers. So, you know, man, I'm really excited about this year's lineup starting out today, and we'll have a little bit more to say about Jeff Dean, and but on February 25th we will have Dwayne Redford. February 19th we're going to have our own Preston and Tyler, our guys that work here in the shop and guide for us, and they're going to bring some their creations to you. On March 5th we're going to have the deer hair master Tim Jacobs. On March 12th Bill Finstamaker, who's near and dear to our heart, will be on the Vise. And last but not least, one of our really supportive local customers, Jordan Horan, will finish it up March 19th. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Our format, we'll open it up to the floor at the conclusion of each fly, and then we'll have a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. We are on a hard stop 2 hours, just so you know, and you know, there is heckling from the crowd acceptable, and from you guys online. So, you know, be more than happy to share your thoughts and your well wishes to Jeff. So with that too, just, you know, we're going to be live streaming these on YouTube, hopefully Facebook as well. You know, so comment, subscribe, like us, share us. That really helps us. With that, let's go. Let's get this show on the road. First up is going to be Jeff Dean, dear friend of ours, dear friend of mine. Super supportive of our efforts here at Montrose Anglers, and I'll let him share with you all the things he's involved in. But getting started, Jeff, I wanted to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Simple, easy questions.
That's the kind I
Nothing to
like.
get, you know, worried about. But when did you begin fly fishing?
Started fly fishing probably about 2 or 3 years after my parents moved to Denver, brought the family out in '68. And I actually started fly fishing after I started tying flies.
Nice. So when did you start fly tying? Next question.
That would have been when I was 10 or 11 years old, that '68, '69 time frame.
And what drew you into that?
My parents bought me a Noll fly tying kit for Christmas one year, and that got me started.
Very cool, very cool.
Yep.
All right, longitude, latitude, where's your favorite place to fish?
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
I want to know the whole. I want to know exactly your favorite place. That's why I said longitude and
You know,
latitude.
the place I frequent most is the Lower Gunnison, out Pleasure Park. I mean, that's it's 15 minutes from my front door, so
Yeah.
I find myself over there quite a bit.
Yeah.
I really like the San Miguel up outside of Telluride. That's
Okay.
just a fun river to fish. with a lot of different things going on there. Like the Uncompahgre up at Pawcatupac, even here in town. So that doesn't really answer the question.
Yeah,
and
I
give you
asked
my
your
absolute
favorite. Not where you fish. What's your favorite place to fish?
Yeah, I guess my absolute favorite's the Gunnison.
The Gunnison.
I really like it.
In the
Yeah.
Social Security hall on the Gunnison. There's
Yeah,
a lot
oh,
of
yeah.
people to know that.
Yeah.
Don't have to walk very far to get there.
Okay, here's the last tough final question. When you're not fly fishing, what do you enjoy doing?
Tying flies is not an acceptable answer.
Outside of our realm, outside of our world.
I enjoy volunteering and reaching out, putting forth efforts in the community to get folks involved with Gunnison Gorge Anglers, our local Trout Unlimited, Fly Fishing International group. I enjoy teaching, fly fishing, fly tying, just sharing the joy that I find in those two activities with other people.
Cool. Take it away, brother.
All right.
It's on you.
Well,
Teach us something.
Speaking of my parents and the Noll fly tying kit that they got me when I was a little kid, this is the book that came with that fly tying kit. And the first fly I'm going to tie today is out of this book. You'll notice the flies in here are hand drawn with colored pencils. This is kind of an antiquated fly tying book, and it's nothing near what you can get on the internet, YouTube, whatever today as far as learning to tie a fly. The extent of their instructions for tying were basically black and white, hand drawn, and they told you how to tie one of the flies in this book, and then left it to you to adapt to figure out how to tie all the rest of them. Needless to say, my first attempts, a lot of them were left a lot to be desired. But I'm doing this today specifically because a week ago, yesterday, my father passed away. So this is for Dad, who never understood what catch and release was. I could not convince him. But then a friend of mine, Thomas Schneider, has an outfitting service, and my dad wanted to go catch bass so bad. So Thomas had a motorboat at the time, and I took him out on Chatfield Reservoir. And we caught a mess of smallmouth, and I said, okay, Dad, you get to clean them. I'm not helping. That convinced him that maybe catch and release was a good idea, because he tried to clean those bass like they were trout. Doesn't work very well. Okay, I'm gonna start this out. There are a lot of guides out there that give you gauges of wire and lead to use with certain hook sizes. I generally follow that guide unless I'm putting a bead on the hook. If I put a bead on the hook, I typically downsize what the charts say by one size, so I get it to slide up inside that hollow back of the bead better. And I'm gonna tie 15. I gotta stop talking because I need to count in my mind now. 15 wraps of lead here.
What gauge?
It's 025, and I lost count. It doesn't matter, because, you know, it's not rocket science. If it was, I wouldn't be doing it. So here we go. That looks about right. And another thing I typically do when I'm tying is the first fly I tie, I will actually measure out the lead that I'm using, or if I'm wrapping a wire rib or a wire body, I'll measure it out on this little board I have here. They sell these here at the shop. It has a ruler on it, has your bead sizing chart, has a Hackle gauge. This is kind of the same. You've got your bead sizing. If you've mixed up your beads and don't know what size they are, you can drop them through here to figure that out. You've got your Hackle gauge, you've got hook sizing. But anyway, I will measure out the length of wire for that first fly I tie, and then after I've wrapped it, I will measure how much I've got left. So that lets me know, okay, that's how much it takes, because I seldom just tie one fly when I sit down. I try to tie multiple flies, so I'm going to be rolling them out. It gives me an idea, okay, I need to measure out this much to get 4 flies out of it. So anyway, we've got the lead on here, and what I do is I push it to the back of the hook. I get a little zap-a-gap. I'm going to want this lead positioned roughly in the middle of the shank. So I put a little drop of zap-a-gap right in front of the wire there. Always smack your bottle to get the zap-a-gap down out of the tube there. And then I just slide this forward over that zap-a-gap to get it where I want it. Okay, next up, I've got some 8/0 UNI-Thread, or probably 6/0 on a larger hook like this. And I just start building a little thread dam in front of the lead, and then this tag end I've got, I slide that back along the lead and then just wrap over. Again, this helps lock that lead in place. Get back here to the back of the lead and build another little thread dam. Snip off the end. And then continue wrapping. On this particular fly, you don't need to worry about touching wraps, just get them kind of close together. You want to be back above the hook barb. Next up, I've got a whiting hen saddle here. I'm going to use that to build the tail. And I say build the tail because with a larger hook like this and the fine, smaller hackle fibers you get on this saddle hackle,
One tough chicken.
it takes a couple layers to build up enough tail to satisfy me. Fish, I don't know, but this is for my own sake, and I think it makes the fly a more effective streamer. So I'll even up the tips on this first clump, pull the stem away, grip them. I'm going to measure them out to about half a shank length. Put that down over top where I left the thread hanging. Use a pinch wrap and take a couple more wraps up over it. So that's kind of a sparse tail. Yeah, it could be okay if you wanted to just get on with things from that point. But I'm going to take a second clump. Again, pull that out. And it's not always going to be straight out to even your tips. Sometimes you're going to have to pull up at a little angle to get those tips even. Sometimes you've got to pull a little bit down to get the tips to even up. So once you've got them fairly even, again, pull that stem away. At this point, you can just lay it on top to measure it. Another pinch wrap. And then go ahead and wrap up over those butt ends.
Jeff, why do you pinch wrap? Why do you pinch wrap?
Because that keeps the thread lined up on where you want to bring it down at. You get a tighter, closer wrap.
Thanks, buddy.
And, because I can.
True.
And when I was advertising for my tying demo here, I said Deaf Jeff, and I'm not joking. My hearing is not my strong suit. Anybody online, if you want to chime in and send a question in too, I can maybe answer those while I'm tying, maybe not, you never know. I get concentrating pretty intently sometimes. When you're kind of a learning tire, even after all these years, I'm still learning. So
As we all are.
yeah, we have a group that we call Flies and Lies that meets once a week. And if you're curious about fly tying, coming to one of those gatherings is a good way to get your feet wet. There are always people there that have a wealth of experience at fly tying, or more than willing to share what they know. There's always an extra vise around, some extra materials and hooks, so you can twist up your own fly if you'd like to. If you already tie on your own and you're just having trouble with a certain technique or pattern, come to one of our Flies and Lies gatherings, and I'm almost guarantee you there'll be somebody there that can help you out and will be more than willing to help you out. Okay, we're going to be putting in some Peacock now for the body of this fly. Oh, no, we're not. See, that happens when I try to talk and tie at the same time, as my fan base out here is well aware. We got to put in the rib. And what we're going to be using this rib for is to lock the palmered hackle in place that we're going to be wrapping back over the body. So you just spiral wrap up to the back of the lead. Lock that in on the far side or the near side. I don't think it really matters that much, but if I do it on the far side, the camera can see it better. That's my reasoning, yeah. As if I have any reasoning to what I do. All right, so we're going to put this hackle, peacock hackle in. Peacock hackle is a fairly fragile, peacock herl is a fairly fragile herl. So what I do is just run it through my lips and breathe on it. That gives a little moisture from my breath on the hackle, and theoretically will keep it from snapping, although there's no guarantees I'll get this accomplished without breaking it. If it's not peacock herl, it's thread. I'm well known for that.
Remember your rib. Because I've seen you finish flies and with ribbing sticking off the back. I'm just saying. We're on film.
Okay, so another pinch wrap to lock that herl down at the front of the tail. Just kind of wrap over it, back up to the wire. Doesn't matter that we got a little bit of fluff left there because we're going to be wrapping over that. It'll get buried. Wrap back to where the tail starts. And now we're going to make what's called a herl rope.
And Jeff, before you do that, I got a quick question for you. Do you put added thread wraps at the front and back of your lead? So that way you don't have a step on there, you make it a smooth transition from the hook up? Do you make a step?
Yeah, I try to get a good ramp built up so it's a fairly smooth transition up to my lead. And then I'll do the same thing on the front here, although I won't come as far off in the front because there's going to be a lot going on up front here that I need to keep plenty of hook space for. Normally you start your thread a hook eye width back. So however wide this hook eye is, that's how far back you would start your thread. You can see I've started it about 2 hook eye widths back. As I mentioned, there's going to be a lot going on up front here, so I want to keep enough bare hook so I can get everything tied in up front without crowding that hook eye. So this is something that I've known about for a long time, building a peacock herl rope. I just never bothered doing it. And then I was at a local tier's house, Gail Dowdy, who has been fishing these waters for pretty much ever. And he said, well, I showed him how to tie this fly he wanted to see. So why don't you use a peacock rope to do that? I said, well, I don't know, I just never have. So that day, well, that one broke off. That's why you put on more than one. That day, I went ahead and made a peacock rope, and it does really strengthen your Herl, and it twists it up really nice if it stays locked in the twister here, which it should now.
Makes the fly bulletproof.
Yep, it really does. It's a really strengthening, as you can see with this loop, that thread is wrapping around the peacock Herl, so that strengthens it and sometimes breaks it when you get too far. But I was trying to get a fairly long rope going here because we've got a lot of shank to cover. Then I grip it with the Hackle pliers and snip off that extra there. And that one that snapped is probably gonna pop out here, but yep, there it goes. Don't worry about it, we can trim that off when we tie this rope off. Just keep wrapping over it. And you'll notice I left my thread hanging there, so I'm wrapping my peacock Herl against the rope. And why I'm doing that is having that thread there keeps this Herl backing up on itself, keeps these wraps nice and tight to each other. It's like having that third hand that none of us as fly tiers have, but wish we had. Okay, we're going to end up short, so we'll go ahead, wrap over, a couple more wraps to lock it in good. Trim out that stray, trim those off, and then we're going to build another dubbing rope with peacock Herl.
Man, that's a big bag of peacock hair.
Yeah. Every once in a while, a guy that's been doing this all of his life decides to retire and move eastward and doesn't want to have all of his fly tying stuff anymore, so he has a big sale in the basement at the Elks Club in Grand Junction. And if you happen to be there, you can pick up a lot of really cool stuff pretty inexpensively. And there will likely be a big sale someday, big garage sale at my house. There'll be a lot of stuff.
What day is that, Jeff?
Sign me up.
Depending on how many negative comments we get today, it could be tomorrow. Yeah, just give it up, Jeff. You're never going to figure this out.
Well, it's early.
All right. So now we're tying in the next batch of Herl to finish out this abdomen. Okay, when you're building this, you want to make sure, you know, how long your hackle or your Herl is. Lock that in place, get up, go over top the loop to lock it in, back up over with a couple of wraps and just leave it hanging there. There are different ways of accomplishing what I'm doing here. There's other tools that are made that some guys use to accomplish this, and I'll be using this on another fly later if I don't talk myself out of time. But you know, that's the other thing about fly tying. There are just ways of getting things done. There's one way better than another way? Not necessarily. So there are plenty of tutorials and stuff on YouTube. If something I'm showing and the way I'm doing it, you try it and it just doesn't work for you, look up that technique on YouTube. I guarantee you, you'll probably find at least 3 different ways of getting it accomplished. So find what works for you and do it. Okay, now we're going to continue this abdomen up with the Peacock Herl rope. That's another thing I do a lot of. Herl and Hackle both start with H. I get confused with words that are similar and start with the same letter, especially with fly tying. So, you know, Hackle and Herl, it's kind of the same in my muddled brain. Okay, we're going to get up kind of right to the front of the lead here. Lock that in. Couple more wraps. And that's another thing, you don't have to worry as much on a larger fly like this with taking a few extra wraps. You're not worried about creating too much bulk because it's a bulky fly to begin with. Now the next step, we're going to put in Whiting Farms Bugger Hackle. This is a product that Whiting Farms puts out. It's a little bit larger hackle that's appropriate for tying woolly boogers, streamers, your larger wet fly type of flies. So pull this out of here. This is the size 8 hook I'm using. So get my little hackle gauge here, and I want to find a hackle that measures out to, you know, just a little bit beyond a size 8, especially out at the end here. Up at the front of it, this measures out to a size 6, which that's okay. So go ahead and pull that out. I'm going to need about 3 times the shank length worth of feather there to get this wrapped in. So I'll snip off what I hope was extra. And when I'm trimming out a hackle to tie in, I use my scissors and just trim out the barbules here and leave a little stub on there because that, I think that helps lock it in a little better. Some people just pull the barbs off and just tie the stem in. That works too. So like I said, whatever works for you, whatever makes the fly look the way you like it to look or you think it should look, it's your fly. Okay, so I wrap over that stem. And now, when I tied this in too, I tied the concave side towards the fly. So I'm going to pull down this first wrap, step up onto the beginning of that peacock herl, and I'm going to get 2 close wraps right up front here to kind of make that a little bit bulkier. And then I'm going to spiral wrap down the rest of the body until I get right to the end here. I'm going to pull that last wrap so it's coming across right there at the end, at the beginning of the tail. I'm going to get this wire that keeps bouncing around. Out of my way. And I'm going to wrap up over that hackle to lock it in place. Yep. All right, so we'll practice makes perfect, so we're going to do this again just to make sure you caught it the first time around.
2 full wraps.
Excellent teaching technique.
Okay, so we're doing that spiral wrap.
Always nice to show how not to do it.
You know, everybody's got to find what they do best and just go with it. And correcting mistakes is pretty much by default what I do best because I make my fair share. And that's why I continue to
Improve every time.
attend things like Flies and Lies and depend on other tires for pointers and feedback on what I'm doing. It's a constant learning process. Fly fishing is a constant learning process. We never have all the answers to every situation that we may encounter. Now, as I'm wrapping this wire up through the body, you notice I'm kind of wiggling it back and forth. And that's so that I don't trap more of these hackle fibers than than absolutely happens. I mean, you're going to trap a few here and there. But if you wiggle that wire back and forth, it tends to work its way between the hackle fibers. If you want to get really persnickety about it,
Good word. Persnickety.
you can take your bodkin and you can, if you see you're trapping fibers, you can take your bodkin in there and just kind of brush them aside. We just keep working that through there. Until we get up to the front of the body. Now what I'll do, I've got a little extra wire here, so I'll go ahead and continue wrapping down over that tapered head I've got. I mean, we put all that lead on there to make this fly sink. So a few extra wraps of wire just adds a little more weight. Plus, it gives you a few more wraps over that wire to secure it in place. I mean, the last thing you want to have happen is that wire to come loose. Now, that can happen even with taking these precautions, because fish's teeth can do damage to your fly, will do damage to your fly. There's helicopter that stub end off. Now I'm back here right at the front of the abdomen. We've got a nice even spiraled hackle here. Extends a little bit beyond the gap of the hook. The next step will be tying in the squirrel tail wing. This is the squirrel tail, available at pretty much any fly shop out there. And when you're tying in squirrel tail, it's a solid fiber. So it's not going to pop up like deer hair does or like elk hair does when you wrap over it and those butt ends stand up. It doesn't on this. So what you've got to do is kind of like what we were doing with the tail back here. You've got to layer it in. So cut out a small clump. Prep it by knocking out the underfur. It's a very small clump to start off with here. We want the tips of this to extend right about to the end of the tail. So measure that out. Drop it down in on top of the hook. Again, pinch wrap to get that right in on top of the hook there. Couple of wraps and sort of spread it out a little bit. And what I like to do here is put in a little half hitch. To lock that in. Now I'm going to trim out at an angle the butt ends of that squirrel tail. Now just kind of spiral wrap over it to get those all bound down a little bit. Purpose of the half hitch, at this point you don't want things to come undone, and you especially don't want to break your thread. Trust me on that. And now what I do is I take a little bit of my head cement, Sally Hansen, hard as nails. Loon makes head cement. There's a lot of head cements out there. Find what you like and use it, or not. Some people don't use head cement when they tie the heads in on their flies. They just do a couple of whip finishes and call it good. What I'm doing here is I'm just putting a little bit of that head cement where I wrapped in that squirrel tail, just another level of security to keep it in place. Always good to have a rag waiting on your lap to wipe your bodkin, your scissors, anything that gets junk on it, to wipe it down. Now we're going to take another bundle of this squirrel. Same thing we did before. It's a small bundle. Brush out that under fur. Line it up over top the last bunch. Down. And then wrap back up to the head. Half hitch. Head cement. You notice I did it in a little bit different order that time. Like I said earlier, there's no right and wrong. You just do what you got to do. We'll go ahead and wrap over those butt ends. Pull them up, trim them out. And I'm going to put one more layer of squirrel tail on top here to kind of complete that wing.
Jeff, are you putting 3 layers of squirrel hair so you don't pull too tight on your thread as you would with one?
I don't follow the question.
Well, if you put one big batch of squirrel hair, you'd have to pull real hard on your thread.
Well, and it bulks up on you.
Right, and it bulks up a little, but if you pull hard enough on that thread, what happens? I'm just giving you a little hard time.
Oh,
You hear that?
well, because I know on the first one, because I hadn't tied squirrel hair when I was practicing this pattern, I hadn't used squirrel tail in a long time. And on the first one, I just took the whole clump and laid it in there and started wrapping over it. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, that's not going to work. because you have this big bulk sticking out in front and this cliff basically, and you'll see on this next step why you don't want that cliff, because you got to finish this head. So I've got a pretty good little bundle here. That'll kind of close up the top of this wing. Measure it out. Get it wrapped in right at the front of the abdomen.
I'm sitting here getting cooked.
Little head cement.
My back is
Half hitch.
Trust me, I can move it out. No, man, I can mobile, buddy. I can mobile.
That's what mine is.
Trim that out at an angle again.
That's what it's doing.
I thought it was the sweat.
Grip it by the husk and wrap to the front. Okay, it kind of slid off there, so what we're going to do is we're just going to build up this front little bit until we have a nice ramp up onto the butt ends of this squirrel tail. This is why you want to use a little bit heavier gauge thread on these larger flies too. I mean, if this was a 8/0 thread, it's a 6/0 I'm using, it would take a lot more wraps to get this all tied in and finished up. So there's no point burning all that thread if you can just step up to a heavier gauge. And on a larger fly like this, it's going to make absolutely no difference other than it's going to take less wraps to get things built up to where they need to be. Okay, trying to kind of, there we go, get this little ramp there out of the equation. Okay, back on the end, we've got a nice little squirrel wing there. And now we're back to peacock herl. See why a big bag comes in handy. We're going to pull out, 3 or 4 fibers. Line up the butt ends of the fibers. Stroke them out wherever your shortest fiber is at, your shortest herl. You're going to trim off those ends. Those ends are really fragile. And what we're going to do is we're going to tie this in on top of that head we just built. And these extra little fibers here are going to help with that little step down between the squirrel tail and the rest of the head. Now you'll notice I'm wrapping my thread back to where I started. I am not going to make a peacock rope on this fly. I'm just going to wrap it the standard way to build this head. Well, we'll trim that out afterwards. But I'm leaving that thread there, as I explained earlier, because that keeps these herls butted up against one another as you wrap forward. So right up on this last one here, lock it in. Couple of wraps in front, trim it out, trap the hackle there, so trim that out, All right. Now we whip finish. Always pull straight back on your thread when you do a whip finish, because what you're doing with that whip finish is you're laying wraps of thread over this piece that's underneath. So when you pull straight back, it doesn't bunch those fibers up. It allows the fibers to stay flat while you pull back underneath. It locks that thread in place. Snip your thread. Little dab of Sally's will do you.
Exactly. Thank you, Bill.
We're breathing it in.
And, oh. I'm surprised that my fans here didn't bust my chops on this one.
We were gonna say.
So many steps, how many, how to remember it. This hackle that you tied in at the back here is much easier to trim off if you don't tie in the wing first. Just get in there and snip that right down next to the wire.
He slimes that section of feather with power bait when he
That's what makes it so
This is the secret. Power bait. When I'm done with a fly like this, I dip it in the power bait, it soaks in, and then I fish it.
Oh my God, and he still got the power bait there.
Always.
But I don't do that in public. You know. All right, so pass this around for critique.
very nice.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
All right.
What's the name of
Hey,
that
real quick, Jeff, we're going to take a 1 minute break.
Okay.
So to all our YouTube followers right now, we're going to be right back, and then your comments will work. So give us 1 minute. We'll be right back.